Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I am back with another video. This is part 2 of the alcohol ink foil backgrounds. Just a quick reminder of what we're working with here, some pretty pink posh products. I used Everyday Greetings, Thoughtful Greetings, Wild Roses, and Pretty Petunias. So originally my game plan was to use those border dies, but because of the really pretty scallop, which I totally love and is super soft, it just didn't feel right with the like the vibrant background of the alcohol inks, which by the way, if you missed that video, it will be linked below in the YouTube description. You should watch that one first. Unless you don't care about making alcohol backgrounds and you just want to see the pretty flowers, then no need. But anyway, so they just felt like they would have more of a, just like a clean feel. So what I ended up doing was, this is Nina Solar White, 80-pound cardstock. And I just ended up cutting a bunch of different ones at different angles to kind of work with my backgrounds. So I use the Fiskars trimmer that has the wire in it so I can see exactly where I'm cutting. I know a lot of people like guillotine trimmers. If that's what works for you, awesome. They freak me out a little bit. I don't know why. They just do. So these are some of the alcohol backgrounds, and this is basically the way I went about it. They are 5x7 sheets, and so I needed to cut them down to be the size of an A2 size card, which is 4¼ by 5½. So all of them, because mine came in a pad, had like that rough edge I needed to trim off, and then I just kind of messed around with them and laid down those white pieces differently so I could figure out what the orientation of the card was going to be and what parts I wanted to cut off versus what parts, were going to be showing. I was trying to conserve as much of that gold foiling as I possibly could because it was so pretty. So yeah, that's it. That's how I went about. And because there ended up being 9 cards, I ended up with quite a few backgrounds. With this one in particular, I had originally went in with the idea of it being a horizontal card, and then turns out I ended up liking it vertical much better. So I just trimmed that white piece down as well as trimmed my background down. So I'm just trying to give you guys like I guess a little bit of insight into my crafting process, and just how I go about doing things. So the only thing that I will tell you, when I was doing alcohol ink backgrounds, I really wanted like a rainbow background. And so I ended up doing 2 of them. And this one was fine because it was a diagonal rainbow. So there was rainbow on both pieces and it was beautiful and I loved it. But the other rainbow background that I did it kind of starting with the reds at the bottom and then moving my way up, to blue and purple at the top. And because I did it that way, I did not have a full, I could have cut right out of the middle of the paper, but then that would have been a waste. So I ended up just cutting it down the middle and having 2 smaller pieces. This piece here is the only piece that has the silver and gold mixative in it. And it's because this is when I was trying to refamiliarize myself with the colors that I owned of alcohol inks because it had been so long since I used them. And then I was like, I'm not wasting this paper. I'll just turn this into a background as well, which is how I ended up with an odd number of cards. But totally fine. Also, it's waste not, want not, right? I had these large pieces that I had trimmed off and I just couldn't bear to throw them away. So what I ended up doing was cutting them into 1/4-inch strips and then creating kind of a different style background. And I will show you that when we get to it. So for the Copic Coloring part, I basically used, for the Pretty Petunias, I did use every stamp that was in there. For the Wild Roses, I used all of them except one, which was the smallest flower. Going to stamp these in intense black ink. Again, still working on this Nina Solar White because I am going to Copic color these. Intense black ink from Simon Says Stamp is Copic safe. And so basically I just laid them all out. I stamped them all down and then I used the acetate trick. So I put acetate down and then I moved my dirty leaf stamps onto the acetate and then picked them back up to stamp them again because I was definitely going to need more leaves than I was flowers. And I did this, well, here I got sidetracked because my magnets were moving each other and then I thought that was fun. So anyway, once I got back to business, I did stamp 2 sheets of both of these. So 2 sheets of the Wild Roses, 2 sheets of the Petunias. just so I knew that I was going to have enough flowers. And then typically I don't have a game plan when I go into making a card, but because I had so many, I had to have a game plan, because I needed to know how many elements I needed and if I had enough. So basically I just drew some very quick sketches for how I wanted to use them. And then I check marked the flowers as I went through to make sure I was going to have enough to build the cards I wanted. So like I said, we're doing Copic coloring today. This is probably not a big shock to you, because I do love my Copic markers. And definitely, since this is something where I'm making a lot of cards, I definitely wanted to go with the medium that I was most comfortable with. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of that, and then we'll have some story time, because you know how I roll. So I'm just using a really light hand, and I'm doing some very light flicking with just the tip of the marker. I'm leaving the highlight on these particular flowers in the center of the petals because it's going to help give them a more round appearance. So by adding shadows to the center, which most flowers are naturally darker there because usually they're cupped, but then also adding some shading to the outside edges, it really will start to look pretty three-dimensional. And the way that the petals are drawn, they're almost like elongated hearts. They have this little divot at the top. And so I'm starting there with like a little triangle of color, to really just kind of accentuate that dip in the petal. So we're just going to do the same thing. I always work lightest to darkest, darkest back out to lightest. That's how I feel I get the best blend. You do whatever works for you. You've seen this song and dance before. So anyway, you guys frequently like hearing about my life, which I think is funny because I don't know, it's not usually that entertaining to live. No, I'm very, very blessed. I have a very good life. But, so if you are a mama or if you have pets, you are going to know, or just anybody in your life that you have to take care of. I have a 4-year-old, and this weekend he had the stomach flu. That was what we dealt with. Unfortunately, we also had tickets to go see the monster truck show this weekend, and that did not work out for us. So basically, he wanted to start Thursday night. He said his tummy was upset. He didn't really feel good. He didn't want to eat. My kid's not a great eater. I mean, honestly, it's like pretty much PB&J and mac and cheese. That's what we're surviving on at this stage in our lives. As long as he's eating enough, I guess, fruit and vegetables to balance that out, I'm good with it. He doesn't really eat meat. I mean, he'll eat like chicken nuggets from McDonald's or Burger King or whatever. He won't eat chicken nuggets if I make them here. Yeah, so that just is what it is. It's not how I would prefer it to be, and I certainly hope he grows out of it. But as long as most of the time he's eating homemade stuff, I'm going to be okay with it. Anyway, so Thursday night, he said that his tummy was upset. So we do bath time, blah, 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 blah. He goes to bed. And then when he goes to bed, I laid down because I knew we were going out of town that weekend for the monster truck show. And I had, card stuff that I needed to get done. So he lays down, I lay down. I wake up when my husband gets out of the shower, because he's ready to go to bed, and we're standing in the hallway. He opens the door to check on our son, and he's like, he has thrown up all over himself, and he's sleeping in it. But just my poor baby, poor baby. I asked him when I, got him up, and I said, why didn't you come get mommy or daddy? And he didn't even know he did it, which as a mother terrified me. So I spent the rest of the night basically checking on him, I don't know, 5 times within 20 minutes because I was just like super paranoid. I'm sure you can relate. So anyway, so we get him up. I get him in the tub. He's crying because he doesn't feel good, and he doesn't want to take a bath, but he's got to take a bath because, he's been sleeping in throw up. So we got to wash that off. My husband strips the bed. I get him all washed up. We remake the bed, get him back in bed. He didn't have a fever or anything. We were all good there. And so I got him the bowl, the throw up bowl. My mom always did the waste basket, like the garbage can. But my garbage can currently right now has like a crack in it. So that's not going to work. So anyway, and then, like I would normally do after, my kid is sick and I'm not sure exactly what I should be doing because I'm all on a wing and a prayer every day of my life. I call my mother. We're going to pause, talk about the card. So on the rainbow color backgrounds, I thought that it would be super pretty to have kind of like a white-ish flower. That is what I'm doing here. So I'm adding shading with this R32, and then I'm going to do all of the shading with my C markers. The C1, the C3, and the C5. And this is just going to, it ended up being really, really pretty. It did. And I would absolutely do it again for a different card. This is not what we ended up staying with because it didn't look right. It just looked too, what's the word? I mean, it just didn't fit. It wasn't vivid enough. It was too soft, too subtle to go with these backgrounds. But anyway, I wanted to show you because I like to show you my whole process because I know a lot of you sit at home and watch these YouTube videos and, or Facebooks or whatever, and everybody's perfect and it's white picket fences and rainbows and puppy dog tails. And, it isn't. Like I go through it. I have a process just like you guys have a process. And sometimes it's a winner and sometimes it's not. And that's totally okay because I learned that I could color this particular type of flower and still really, really like it. And maybe I'll use it on, the same technique on a different card. Anyway, back to my situation. So I'm on the phone with my mom and I hear his door open and I'm like, you all right, buddy? And then he starts the gagging. So I'm like, gotta go, Mom. I've got a situation on my hand. So he does make it to the bathroom. I feel so terrible for him. He's just this little teeny tiny thing and he's so sick. And, but if you have children, you have dogs or whatever, nothing will make you move faster than the sound of somebody dry heaving. Like, all of a sudden, like my feet have wings and I'm super flexible and I can move at the speed of light because I do not want vomit on my floor. I don't want to, it's bad enough to have to just clean up in general, clean him up, do, the whole thing, let alone have to clean my carpet. Which, yeah, I just don't want to do it. So he's sick probably like 4 more times that night. And each time you can just tell he's got like the dark under eye circles and he's so tired and just you feel terrible for him. So that was Thursday night. Then Friday, he seemed to be doing better. I took him to my mom and dad's. And then I think he was there maybe 5 minutes. And I get a message from my mom. Yeah, he just threw up again. And I'm like, oh, God. Like, do you need to come back and get him? Whatever. And she's like, no, we're fine. Kudos to my mother. Thank you for all of your help in my life. So I did get a little bit of a break and I got to catch a little bit of sleep there. And then he was fine for the rest of the day. He ate lunch. He managed to keep that down. He still looks really tired, but we were good. So then the next day is when we were going to the monster truck show. And we were like, okay, so he's been keeping this stuff down. He seems to be okay. Maybe it was just something he ate, 24-hour bug, what have you. We should be good to go. So the problem is that when I bought the tickets, I'm from Northeast Ohio. And when I bought the tickets, for some reason, when I pulled them up on Ticketmaster, it actually pulled up Columbus. And I'm not really sure why still, but I wasn't paying attention. I just bought the tickets. And then afterward, when they came in my email, I was like, oh, this is not for here. And so I told my husband, I was like, I guess we're taking a road trip. And he's like, yeah, it'll be fine. Like, it's only 2 hours away. So that should be good. So we don't have any time in the morning to make a decision. Do you know what I mean? It's not like the show was here and it was at 1:00 and we could see if he ate breakfast. So we get up at like 6 a.m. and my husband's like, I'm going to take him to the gas station with me and we'll see how he does. So the next thing I know, they're coming in the door and he's like, threw up in the driveway. And I'm like, okay, so let's get your coat off. He's clearly still sick. We're not going anywhere. And and then I will spare you the details. But after the vomiting, whatever, the 48 hours of vomiting, the other end of it set in. My poor baby, my poor kid, and he was just horrified. So anyway, back to the card. Back to the card. So here is where I'm comparing it. You can see the two styles clearly do not go together. So I tell you all the time that if you're just starting out with your Copic markers, to buy grays. Grays are boring. Nobody wants the grays. But grays, not only can you color black and white if you buy a variety of grays. So if you start at a C1 and end up at a C9, you can color black and white. But you can also shade other colors with them. So here you can see I've done all the shading with the grays. I'm not going to add any other, well, eventually I will. But right now I'm not adding any other shading. And you can see this still has some depth and dimension, even though I went over it with a completely different color. And that's because of those gray markers. I promise you they are such a good tool to have. So this is the original color combination that I was going to use when I was coloring reds. And I will eventually go back into those other two and add the same shading because they just looked flat comparative to everything else. The shading looked different and didn't look as dimensional. So while the grays will give you some shading, I didn't go back over it with the grays. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I covered it with one color and then I didn't go back in and add any more shading with the gray markers. And I think it would have looked more dimensional, but I'm kind of weird about being matchy. You heard my story about, like my nail polishes and stuff, or maybe you haven't. You have if you watch the W+9 channel. But anyway, so I just wanted them to match. Anyway, back to the story. So we didn't go to the monster truck show. We spent our entire weekend basically washing him, washing clothes, stripping the bed, stripping him, rinse, repeat. That was like basically our entire weekend. And thankfully we were both off. And so we were able to kind of, work in shifts so that everybody got sleep and everything else. And so that was so much better. Here, now I gravitate towards a purple-blue combination, meaning my reds are more purple-blue. I hope that makes sense. But when I compared it to, after everything had dried back and I compared it to the cards, it really was more of a tomato-based red, so more yellow. And so I, again, just covered the whole thing with a R05, and that worked as well. Here I'm just showing you a couple of the other combinations that I used. I'm not going to show you the coloring of every single flower because you saw them and I did them all the same, and this video is still like 30 minutes long. So now we're all colored up. Colored. And you can see I've broken them up into groupings with a pencil so I know which cards they belong to. And then that's how I'm going to cut them out. I'm going to cut around that pencil line so that I can keep everything grouped together. So I don't have to go like, well, wait, what was I using for this? Or how many leaves did I need? I already know because I grouped them together and kept them together. I am going to fussy cut these images. And so that is what I'm doing here. I am right-hand dominant, so I hold the scissors in my right hand. I move the paper with my left. This gives me the smoothest cut. I did not show it, but then I would also recommend going around the edges with a water-based black marker to smooth out any edges that maybe you didn't get a super clean cut. Now I'm just continuing on with my cutting, and I realize that I have not outlined any of these images. Any of them. And I tell you guys all the time, make sure you outline if you're going to do it before you die cut, before you fussy cut, before you whatever, because it is a nightmare to chase them around your desk. Well, thankfully I only did 2, well, 1.5, because it is just as horrific as I remember. So I did outline all of those, and on the wild roses I added some white gel pen details. So now everything is cut out. I'm going to stamp the sentiments, and I actually did them 2 different ways. So for this one, I'm going to stamp in black, and I have to lay out my flowers. I don't want to adhere them because I want to put some dimension on these cards, but I have to lay them out so I know where to put my sentiment. So I'm going to put this one in the top-ish right-hand corner, And then I'm going to stamp it in black Simon Says Stamp ink. It's a really good crisp ink for stamping sentiments. And then I did stamp this one 2 times. I stamped all of them 2 times because I wanted to make sure that I was not going to have to go back and do this again. Because honestly, by the time that I was making the cards, by the time I was putting them together, I was pretty over it. Stand by. There's 2 that have vellum on them. And these are the ones that I cut in half and use them as smaller panels. And so for those ones, I wanted to do some heat embossing. That seemed to make the most sense for the design. So I'm using my anti-static powder bag here, putting that down on vellum. And you definitely want to make sure you do that if you're heat embossing on vellum because everything sticks to it. Everything. I'm stamping in Versamark ink. And again, I did stamp these twice to make sure that I got a really good impression. Didn't want to have to worry about any issues going back. And then I'm going to use white embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. I already have my heat gun heating up the whole time I'm doing all of the other prep work. Because vellum warps really easily. So you don't want to leave your heat gun on the vellum. You want to move it away, let it cool down, and then do it again. So now we're on to the actual assembly. I have some white fun foam here and all of the white panels, or in one of the rainbow cards, I did pop up the rainbow panel. But anyway, they each have some dimension on them. This is a relatively simple design. I wanted it to have some interest to it besides just the background. So I popped all of those up after I stamped the sentiments on there. Now you can stamp over white fun foam, because it is solid, but I really just didn't want to take any chances that one area wasn't going to be solid. It was going to be weird or strange or any of that, because here we are 9 cards in, right? Right. So, just putting that on there, and then I messed around for quite a bit of time with the flower arrangement. I was really kind of struggling getting something that I liked. Once I got so frustrated with them moving around, chasing them around. That's my least favorite part. You guys know that. I don't like the little finicky bits. I use Tombow multi-glue on the back of them because it's dries repositionable. It has to be that glue because as far as I know, it's the only one that dries repositionable. And then I tap it off with my finger. And then this creates a situation where I can move them around. They're not going to tear my card or anything like that. And I can move them however I want to move them, and I don't have to chase them. And that is honestly makes me so very happy. So once I finally found an arrangement that I liked, the flower and this leaf hung over. So I put some foam tape underneath just that edge and then glue on the other parts for the white portion. And then I glued that down. The leaves underneath haven't been glued yet, but I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to pick those up and put the glue underneath them so that they aren't, moving around. For this one with the vellum, I did the same thing. There's that white fun foam. I'm popping up the actual background on the white card base. And can we just talk about how pretty this is? It's so pretty. I love these backgrounds. And this one I also white heat embossed the sentiment. And I'm not going to adhere the vellum yet. I'm going to adhere my flowers to the vellum first. So that way I know where I can put my adhesive and it won't show. For this one, I'm doing kind of like a half C's. I'm popping up just the blooms and I'm gluing down the leaves and the stem. So for this one, I kind of had to fuss around with the flowers just a little bit because that one on the right hand side kept wanting to hang over the edge of my card and I didn't want it to. I want to be able to put it in an envelope if I so choose. So again, just putting that glue on the back where it's going to be hidden. And then the top left-hand corner where the sentiment is did kind of stick up a little bit, which I didn't really love. So in order to fix that, I am going to put some sequins around there. So I used clear sequins from, also from Pretty Pink Posh. And then I'm going to put the teeny tiniest little dot of glue on the back of the sequins underneath the vellum where it will be hidden. And then I will push down just the sequins. So that way it does give me just a little bit more, I guess a little bit more surface area of the vellum that is adhered. This is the one I was telling you about where I just couldn't bear to throw anything away. So I have, it's the 2 backgrounds I did that were, just large color panels. So I did the one that was like the purple, pink, blue, and then one that was like the blue, teal, green. And then I just cut them into strips, and I started at the top. So I knew I would have enough room for my flower. I covered the rest of it in adhesive, and I'm just lining these bad boys up. I'm going to trim off the extra once I'm done. And I did have to trim some of the extra off the bottom, but it wasn't a huge deal. That can be tricky, especially if you are covering up both of your corners. It can be tricky to make sure that you have a straight cut. But yeah, so I just trimmed that down. And then I did the flowers just like I did all the other flowers with the foam tape and all that. This is the only one that the background isn't popped up, and it's just because I didn't want the bulk of having to glue it to one paper and then to another. So these are all of the cards. I have still photos on my blog of all of them in case you would like a better look at each individual one. And then, like I said, if you did not catch the alcohol ink background video, I will link that below. So anyway, in a nutshell, my whole weekend was just kind of crazy. Thank you, Jesus. My little peanut is feeling much, much better. But it was just, it was super, super tiring. So we took off to do something fun, and then we ended up just not having any fun at all. It was just so much laundry. Just so much laundry. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.
What?